Welcome into the Charm City Birdwatch podcast. I'm your host, Jake McDonnell. You can follow me on Twitter at jmcdonnell95. Of course, this podcast coming to you crystal clear through iTunes or SoundCloud. Be sure to subscribe to both mediums. Check us out at charmcitybirdwatch.com and CharmCityBW on Twitter. Joining me now on the podcast is Charm City Birdwatch reporter and insider Vasilios Nikolaou, who is also a reporter for Legacy Maker Sports Network, does his own podcast over there, and of course an fellow intern at WBAL TV 11. He is on Twitter at the NFL Guy. So before we get into all the divisional round, we're going to go into all that. We're going to talk about the playoffs. We're going to go over the decision with the Ravens to promote from within with Don Wink. Martindale is a new defensive coordinator. We're going to talk about the Patriots rumors that have blown up the news circuits, especially this weekend, and end with a little bit of Terps talk. So Vasilios, before we go into the divisional round, top takeaways for you as far as Wildcard weekend is concerned.
Wild Card weekend. I mean, it kind of lived up to the hype. I mean, the AFC side of things, you know what? Chiefs and Titans definitely lived up to or outdid themselves when it came to hype, I guess. The Jaguars and Bills game, that was as bad as anybody could have imagined. I mean, we saw Blake Bortles have more rushing yards than passing yards, and that in itself made for an extremely boring game. As we all know, the Jaguars won 10-3, and they're on their way to Pittsburgh this weekend. But the NFC side of things, both games ended up being very competitive, very fast-paced. Although the Rams had the highest scoring offense, but you would never have guessed that against the Falcons on Saturday night last week, as they only laid 13 points down. And, of course, the Saints won the game against the Carolina Panthers the next night after being up after scoring 21 points before halftime. They almost fell victim to the same scenario that Andy Reid fell to the day prior, and that's getting too relaxed in the second half, and the Panthers almost made a comeback. But as we all know, it's going to be a fun divisional weekend this weekend, and Wildcard weekend still hasn't lost its charm.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking ahead to the divisional round now, we're not going to give picks out because our pick article is going to be coming out tomorrow with insight from not only Vasilios and myself, but Nolan and Tyler as well, as we break down all of the divisional round games as we did for the wild card last week. And just talking about just the games, I mean, let's go over Saturday first. I mean, the Falcons taking on the Eagles, this number 6 seed taking on the number 1 seed, where a lot of people were picking the number 6 seed, and rightfully so. And you made a really good point of how the Falcons defense really limited Jared Goff and the Rams offense, who was thought to be one of the top offenses in the NFL. Now you have an offense with Nick Foles leading the way. Should be Carson Wentz, but as we all know, it's Nick Foles. And really, I think the Falcons have one of the more underrated defense in the NFL. They play very fast, and their style of defense going up against a limited guy like Nick Foles, something tells me the Falcons are going to win this game big.
I totally agree with you there, and I think the one saving grace the Eagles would have in this matchup against the Falcons, though, would be their defense, and their running game, which both things have come up big for them this year. We saw them add Jay Ajayi mid-season from the Miami Dolphins, and he was just an instant star in that backfield. That's a crowded backfield, too, with Garrett Blount, Jay Ajayi, Wendell Smallwood, and so on. And so Nick Foles has a plethora of targets to get to. The only problem is, can he get the ball there efficiently? And we saw the last game of the season against the Cowboys, albeit they had their third string quarterback come in after Foles. The Cowboys ended up winning 6-0. So the explosiveness in that offense through the passing game is pretty much gone. And the Falcons, as you alluded to, their defense, according to a lot of people, is one of the fastest in the league right now. And sometimes speed makes up for what you lack in skill. And I'm going to take a shot at Brashad Perryman here, because in his case that is not true. But the Falcons defense, they have a perfect blend of speed and skill to get everything done. As we saw them take on the Rams were just dumbfounded. They couldn't find a way to do anything. Even Todd Gurley had double-digit carries for 100 yards, and they still couldn't get anything done on offense. So the Falcons are definitely the favorite in this game. As for the Eagles, let's hope they can offer some sort of challenge. They are the number 1 seed, and last time that the Eagles and Falcons faced off in the playoffs, Michael Vick was the quarterback for the Falcons, and Donovan McNabb was the quarterback for the Eagles.
Do you think that the second game on Saturday, the Titans and Patriots game, do you think that that game is even going to be remotely close, or should I plan on either taking a nap or texting my friends to see what they're doing on their Saturday night?
See, I made the mistake of taking a nap through the first half of the Chiefs game last week. So I was like, oh yeah, so the Chiefs they're up 21-3 at halftime. Let's see what happens here. And then I drive down to WBAL, and I'm just listening to the radio the entire time, and I just hear this miraculous comeback. Marcus Mariota throwing a touchdown to himself, and then it's Eric Decker catching a touchdown, and something's a fumble, then it's not a fumble. It was pretty crazy, and I mean the 22-21 victory by the Tennessee Titans. They might have saved Mike Mularkey's job because, as I said in my analysis last week, my picks, Mike Mularkey's job was he was on the chopping block. He was one of those coaches that even though he made the playoffs, he could lose his job as soon as they find their way out. And in my analysis, they were one of the weakest teams going in. Now, they still might be one of the weakest teams. They mentioned that DeMarco Murray will not be playing for them this week, and it's going to be the Derrick Henry show in the backfield. Let's see if Marcus Mariota can find his way back from the mediocre season he had to become a real playoff star. And I think it's possible. We know the Patriots are not immortal this season. They're definitely prone to mistakes, as we've seen from Matt Patricia's slightly leaky defense this season. Derrick Henry could give them a run for their money, and I think Marcus Mariota will give them a little bit of a headache too. But all in the end, I think it'll be a closer one, but the Patriots still pull it out.
If we're looking for closer games, I would have to imagine that Sunday's probably going to be a little bit more interesting than Saturday. First up, the Jacksonville Jaguars traveling to Pittsburgh, as you said earlier, to take on the Steelers. And then after that, the Saints battling the Vikings. Big two marquee matchups here. Let's focus on the AFC first. You know, I do think this game is going to be a lot different than the matchup in October where Big Ben threw 5 interceptions and the Jaguars just curb stomped the Steelers. I think the Steelers are going to come out on top this time. I'm not so certain that Blake Bortles is going to be able to squeak by what he did last week. I think the Jaguars are going to have a run-heavy attack, and the Steelers are going to be ready for it. And, you know, the Jaguars have a fantastic defense. There's no disputing that. But when you ask me what Blake Bortles is going to be able to do in Pittsburgh with that crowd against the Steelers defense, and then you talk about what Roethlisberger, a veteran quarterback, is going to be able to do with weapons like Brown and Bell, that doesn't spell well for Jacksonville for me.
Well, see, I would agree with you, but we've seen Jacksonville and Pittsburgh play earlier this season in the same game. Even with all the weapons, we saw Ben Roethlisberger toss 5 interceptions, 2 of which were returned for touchdowns. So I think Jacksonville has a very good chance to win this game here, and even more so because Antonio Brown is coming back. This is his first week back after suffering a torn calf muscle. I doubt that he's going to be 100%. He's going to be on the field for at least 95% of the snaps, but I really don't think he's going to have as much of an impact as he would, say, if he was fully healthy. Now, I think who they're really going to target a lot is rookie phenom Juju Smith-Schuster. And if I have any sense in my mind, I think that Jalen Ramsey is going to be taking on Smith-Schuster and leaving the shorter corner and more shifty corner in A.J. Boye, who we saw was an absolute star with the Texans last year and was able to get 2 picks off Tom Brady. I think Boye is going to have a good game while covering Antonio Brown. The only problem the Jaguars have had, the Jaguars have had trouble with stopping the run. And last week they were able to keep LaShawn McCoy to a minimum because he was coming off a week where he had been injured. But going against Le'Veon Bell, that's always one of the more tough assignments in the NFL. Putting all that in perspective now, I think the Jaguars win this game just based on what happened last time. I think Jaguars just brings the pressure and is way too creative with his defense for how straightforward Pittsburgh's offense has become.
Real quick, I saw some pictures on Twitter and on the internet of Ryan Shazier at Steelers practice in a wheelchair. Great stuff to see, even though he's not up and walking yet. Still nice to see him out and about, out of the hospital, certainly after the injury he sustained. But wrapping up divisional weekend is going to be the Saints and the Vikings. This probably, like we were talking about the last week with the Panthers and the Saints probably being the marquee matchup, the last game on Sunday, probably going to be the best game of the week here, I'm predicting. Although I do think that the Jaguars and Steelers game has the most interest from Ravens fans. I think this is going to be a great game and really interesting storyline here. Again, these teams met in week one. Very different game with Sam Bradford playing for the Vikings in that game, and a lot of people were talking about, I originally made my pick last week, the Rams beating the Falcons. I switched it to the Falcons later in the week because I thought that the Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Devontae Freeman, and Dan Quinn experience factor was going to be better than that of Jared Goff, Todd Gurley, McVay. And I think there's really a certain case to be had here. You could talk about the same thing in the other NFC game with Matt Ryan taking on Nick Foles this week. But to me, I mean, so everyone wants to talk about, the Vikings possibly hosting the Super Bowl this year. I would love to see that. I'm not sure how I feel about Drew Brees and Sean Payton, all their playoff experience going up against a quarterback in Case Keenum, and then Mike Zimmer, that with limited playoff experience. I know the Vikings defense is very vaunted. They're going to be at home. I don't know. This game, on paper, definitely the game of the week, definitely the most storylines surrounding it in terms of everything happening on the field. What do you think as far as this matchup goes? I think this could be a classic right here.
Oh, I definitely think it's going to be a classic. And, I mean, this game takes place in a dome. It's in Minnesota, the home of this year's Super Bowl. So, as we all know, if the Vikings manage to make it that far, they'll have home field advantage in the Super Bowl. So, since the Rams lost and the Rams were my pick to make the Super Bowl for the NFC, I am going to ride the Viking train here. And I think they're going to really give the Saints a hard time because their defense has been one of the best in the NFL, in my opinion. The comparison I have for the Jaguars, they're the comparison I have for the Jaguars. The Vikings are pretty much a mirror image of the Jaguars that we see in the AFC, except the fact that they have a competent quarterback under center in Minnesota, in Case Keenum. And I feel like everybody is just waiting for Case Keenum to become Case Keenum again. He's been playing lights out this season, and everybody's just sitting on the edge of their seat waiting for him to slip up and make a typical Case Keenum mistake. I don't think it's going to happen. I think the pieces around him are too good. I think Jerick McKinnon and Latavius Murray are too good. I think Stephon Diggs, Kyle Rudolph, and Adam Thielen are all too good for a guy like Case Keenum to really screw up, because all you have to do is feed those guys the ball, and you're in a dome. You really don't have to exert yourself or throw against the wind. So you're just getting the ball to your top playmakers there, and then once your job is done on offense, you look to your defense led by Danielle Hunter, looking at Everson Griffin, and we see all these guys just making plays. Eric Kendricks, the linebacker, Anthony Barr, and it's all these guys are ready to make plays. This is a Vikings team that I think is one of the most complete, well-rounded teams in the NFL currently, and I think the Vikings stand a very good chance. I think they're going to definitely give the Saints some headaches here. But the Saints, they do have Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram. Drew Brees hasn't had to do much this season, but we will definitely see how that high-powered offense goes against the Vikings defense. And also watch out for Saints quarterback Marshawn Lattimore, who has been one of the league's best cornerbacks this season. I'm excited to watch this game. I know you are too.
And before we shift gears here on the Charm City Birdwatch podcast, again, being joined by insider reporter Vasilios Nikolaou for us, again, via the NFL Guy on Twitter, as well as the Legacy Maker Sports Network and an intern for WBAL. Again, one of the teams involved in the divisional round is the New England Patriots, and there have been some rumors coming out there recently, a lot of stories. ESPN wrote a big story about, the possible suffering relationship between head coach Bill Belichick, owner Robert Kraft, and quarterback Tom Brady. A lot of layers to the story. There's a lot of things you could say about it, a lot of directions you could spin it. Of course, another layer added this morning when we found out that Matt Patricia, defensive coordinator of the Patriots, the favorite to land the head coaching job of the New York Giants, which actually Bill Belichick's been linked to for a long time. I just, you don't have, I'm not going to break it all down. Anyone that's listening to this podcast probably knows what's going on there. We're going to have to wait until after the season concludes and the Super Bowl is over to actually see what to make of this story and how much validity there is to it. But where are you at, and how are you reacting to this new information that we just got this weekend about possibly a suffering relationship between three of the oldest guys at their positions in the NFL?
Okay, so, I looked at it, and when I first saw it, Jake, I was like, this can't be right. Someone's probably just putting this out there, and then I saw it was on ESPN, like an ESPN writer put it out. And I'm like, okay, there's something going on here.
ESPN has very strong ties to the Patriots, by the way.
Yeah, and the article was very well detailed. It was very well thought out beforehand, and I saw this. Like he gave us a lot of good detail about the inside of the Patriots building, inside the locker room, and all those kind of things. And the more I looked at it, and the more I heard people talk about it, the more I thought there had to be some validity to what was going on here. And I don't maybe it was exaggerated a little bit. I don't think it's as dramatic as the writer is putting it out to be. But I do think that Brady and Kraft could be working against, or not against, but not on the same page as Belichick right now. I think Belichick did want Jimmy Garoppolo. I think he wanted to sign to a big deal because he saw what Garoppolo could do. We saw what Garoppolo could do. Look what happened when they won the final 5 games of the season in San Francisco with him under center. I think Belichick was a little bit upset, and I think that Tom Brady, looking behind him and seeing a quarterback there who could become Bill Belichick's new golden boy, I think Brady would want him out of the building because he saw what he did to Drew Bledsoe way back then, and he doesn't want the same thing happening to him. So it's not completely out of the ordinary, and I really don't think it's that far-fetched of a story. I'm just really curious for the end of the season to come around to see the inner workings get exposed to the public, and we see what happens to the dynasty that's been going on since 2001.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, on the Charm City Birdwatch podcast, coming to you through iTunes and SoundCloud, going over all things NFL playoffs and the Patriots rumors. Now shifting gears to some recent Ravens news, again, locally here, promoting linebackers coach Don Wink Martindale to the new defensive coordinator position. Of course, the Ravens did this almost a week after John Harbaugh had his season-ending press conference, again announcing that Marty Mornhinweg would return again, and then shortly after that, they brought back Greg Roman, so figured out on offense, and then defense, really, I think the Ravens really wanted Chuck Pagano. They were really interested in possibly having him back, but I was talking this about to a bunch of people. He was in a bad situation with Jim Irsay, or running the show there. Just the relationship between him. Of course, they have the Blaine Duck general manager who just got fired. He was not really given a talented roster. His quarterback's been injured, and on top of all this, he survived a battle with cancer. He's just been through a lot over the past few years, and I wasn't really expecting him to be back. With that being said, I kind of think it took a little long for the Ravens to name Wink the new defensive coordinator, but I wasn't shocked at all to see this. They said last week that they wanted to stick with somebody who knows the system, and yeah, he had a year in Denver as defensive coordinator that had a really bad season, worst defense in the NFL, but his top player, Elvis Dumervil, was injured that season. He didn't have Von Miller. This was the year before they drafted Miller. And at the same time, he coached under McDaniels, who just had a horrible reign. We are talking about McDaniels possibly being a head coaching candidate. You certainly don't see that being brought up about Wink Martindale being on that staff. But where are you as far as this unit's concerned? And I guess really now that we know who the offense and defensive coordinators are going to be for the Ravens, after they failed to make the playoffs again, are you satisfied with the guys calling the shots now, or are you a little bit concerned?
Well, I can tell you I'm still not satisfied with Marty Mornhinweg still as the offensive coordinator.
I'm very happy they're bringing Roman back. When I found that out, I was thrilled.
Yeah, that was my next thought. I saw that they gave him the promotion, and I guarantee you there was a little bit of a pay raise in there, along with his brand new title. And Greg Roman being back, that's huge to help to supplement the Mornhinweg retention. Now, bringing in Martindale, I like Martindale. I think what he's done with the linebackers since he's been here has been exceptional work. And I think working with C.J. Mosley, C.J. Mosley's already become kind of a centerpiece of this defense, but with Martindale taking on a larger role as the defensive coordinator, I think we might see him get a little more creative with the way he uses C.J. Mosley in the defense. When it comes to Martindale, I was doing some research over at WBAL the other night, and since 1996, the year that the Ravens came into existence, the first coordinator was Marvin Lewis from 1996 until 2001, and then he left, and there was a coach under him that took the reins there. I believe it was oh goodness, I lost the name there, but after this coach left, then it was Greg Madison. After Greg Madison, it was Rex Ryan, and so on. So the Ravens in 21 years have never had to hire an outside coach to become their defensive coordinator, and no defensive coordinator from the Ravens has ever been fired. They've either gone on to a new job or they've just retired. And I thought that was very interesting, and they're keeping a long streak going by promoting Don Martindale. And I think Don Martindale has I heard a good comparison the other day, and it was a comparison a little bit to Rex Ryan being very feisty, being very, very in your face about certain things. And I think that's a big thing that the Ravens were missing. I mean, it's not coming from a player or a Ray Lewis type, but it is coming from a coach, which I think coming from a coach, that could be very helpful. I feel like Dean Pease wasn't as in your face. I think he was very quiet and collected, and I think maybe this is a good thing for the Ravens. Maybe they have a guy they all respect, and maybe he's the one that can unlock everybody's potential on that defense. We've seen what they can do. Let's see how they can do it better.
Mike Nolan was that name you were searching for, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. No, Mike Nolan.
One last topic here for insider and reporter Vasilios Nikolaou for Charm City Birdwatch. Again, via the NFL guy on Twitter. We're going to talk some Terps hoops here. I talked about this with Nolan the other night when I had him on the podcast. I want to get your thoughts now. I know you're a regular follower of Maryland basketball. He thinks that, despite the loss of Melo Trimble and the injuries to Justin Jackson and Avon Bender, this season, he's confident in not necessarily, being a distinct powerhouse in the NCAA, but feeling good about the young talent on this team and where they can go this season. Again, conference play is just opening up. The Terps are 14-4, have a big matchup against Ohio State tomorrow night on the road. They will return home to the Xfinity Center next Thursday with the matchup against Minnesota. How close are you? You're attending some of their games and taking photos, are you not?
I am, and I was up there their last game against Iowa, and that was quite the exhibition there. And let me tell you, being there to watch Bruno Fernando did what he did to that Iowa team, that was something special. And I had the pleasure of talking to him afterwards, and we were talking about it. And he's like a lightning rod, and he just changes the entire atmosphere. He makes one play, and the entire atmosphere of the Xfinity Center it changes, and it's just this giant roar from the crowd. And he's exactly what this team has needed. He's only a freshman, and I'm not going to hazard. I'm not hazarding into this. I'm going to say that he is the best player on the Terrapins roster right now, outside of Anthony Cowan, who's been running this offense like a well-oiled machine, except for the turnovers. I think Bruno Fernando is extremely, extremely talented, and I mean, we saw what he and Michael Tchaikovsky, the other big man they have there, what they can do together when they're on the floor at the same time. They were on the floor for a good 12 minutes towards the beginning of the game, and with that, there was an offensive explosion. We were halfway through the first half, and Bruno Fernando and Michael Tchaikovsky had given Maryland already 25 points, and they were on pace by the middle of the first half to score 50. And, Maryland ended up scoring 91 points. Can't be terribly upset with that, especially against a Big Ten opponent.
I give Turgeon a lot of credit. The talent, he lost last year, and then you couple along the injuries this year. it's really going to be interesting to see what he's going to be able to do with all this young talent on this roster. But I give him a lot of credit from what he's been able to do so far.
Oh, I totally agree. And for all those after every season where Mark Turgeon doesn't win a national title that are just screaming for Mark Turgeon's head on a platter, Mark Turgeon has brought basketball and brought love for basketball back to Maryland. He's made a competitive team, and nobody seems to recognize that. And it's all about the wins. I understand that's what today's culture is. It's what have you done for me lately? And there's not been a title in Maryland for a little while, so I understand where everybody's coming from. But Mark Turgeon, I feel, is a few players and a few key situations away from having this team make a deep push in March Madness. And I think this is just a start. And Bruno Fernando and Anthony Cowan and Daryl Morcell, they're all at the front of it right now. And everybody has a front row seat to something special being created in College Park right now.
Charm City Birdwatch reporter and insider Vasilios Nikolaou, not only the inside scoop for us, but he's done a lot of good work with the Legacy Maker Sports Network, with WBAL, and lots of good experience going to Ravens and Redskins games constantly, as well as Terps games as well. Vasilios, great to have you on, and we'll certainly have to do this again on the Charm City Birdwatch podcast, all throughout the playoffs and the offseason, as well as Ravens and Orioles. The Orioles will be reporting for pitchers and catchers in a couple weeks to spring training. Mini camp starting this week as they begin the 2018 preparations for the Orioles, and certainly a lot on their plate on and off the field. So for Vasilios, again, I'm Jake McDonnell. Through either iTunes or SoundCloud, be sure to check us out at CharmCityBirdwatch.com and our handle CharmCityBW on Twitter. We will talk to you next time on the next edition of the Charm City Birdwatch podcast.